Hi, everybody. I just want to take a second before this episode starts, before the intro. Just a conversation between you and I. No lights, no editing, no microphones, just you and I. I first want to thank everyone for the tips and the outpouring of love. We've received hundreds of messages, and it's incredible. And I feel like this documentary is working. The word is getting out there, and people are starting to have memories, and they're sending us those memories, which is amazing. Most of the things we've been sent, we already knew about in the past. Our research was quite good. And so some of the things you guys have mentioned to us, just wait because it's coming. One thing that was mentioned to us that we did not know before and had never heard of was a guy in Quispam Sis was charged with raping his paper girl after he picked her up from the exhibition around the same years that Kim Amero went missing. So that's something definitely worth looking into, and we are going to dig into that for sure. We have had a lot of tips, over 50 tips, about a dig that took place on Kingston Peninsula in 2009. What I mean by that is there was a dig that the police did on a campground property in 2009, and they were very hush-hush about it. They didn't say why they dug. When they left, they didn't say what they did while they were there. In fact, they said their earth-moving equipment that they brought in was never used. However, our sources say they were looking for a missing drug dealer. Other sources say they were looking for a dead prostitute. Locals say they dug 3 holes, but the police and other people say they didn't dig at all. So that dig in itself is an unbelievable mystery. Now, we did know about this dig, but we bypassed it because of the timeline. Michael Wayne McGray, if he did say that he kidnapped and murdered Kim Amero, he would have said it in 2000. This dig happened in 2009. So I don't want to think that it took the police 9 years to dig for Kim, but you never know. So we are looking into the Michael Wayne McGray theory a little bit more due to this new information, only because that dig itself is such a mystery and no one's talking. You'll hear more from us if we can find some sort of correlation between this 2009 dig and Kim Amero. If you have a correlation between this 2009 dig and Kim Amero, please let us know. Or if you have a tip regarding the disappearance of Kim Amero, of course, contact St. John Police. The second thing I want to mention is this episode itself. I let my emotions get the better of me in this episode, and I shouldn't. My heart beats fast. I get animated and angry when it comes to the topic of crimes against children. And in this episode, we introduce someone who was charged with crimes against children. And that does not mean that he raped and killed and buried Kim Amero. That's not what it means. But I feel like I give the tone that that's what it means. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted you, the listener or the watcher, to be able to come up with your own opinions and formulate your own ideals without using my emotions and my opinions as a basis. So please, if you can during this episode, put my emotions aside and tell me what you think at the end of this episode, what you think about this person. That's all I have to say. Thank you again so much for watching. Keep the tips coming in, keep the love coming in, it's very appreciated, and I hope you enjoy Finding Kim Amero, Chapter 3. Thank you for tuning in to Finding Kim Amero, Chapter 3, The Backstory. My name is Jamie Splood, and whether you're watching this on the documentary or you're listening to this on the podcast, I appreciate you joining me on this journey. Next week's episode is going to feature some very incredible people and some very incredible stories, and the backstory is how I came upon those people and all of this information. So let's get started. Throughout history, psychics have been both esteemed and scorned. Their power is a subject of both belief and serious cynicism. Yet whether their psychic powers are genuine or not, psychics have played a significant role in shaping world history. In centuries past, kings would use their seers to plan marriages and wage battles. There's celebrities today who will only take the advice of their seers and psychics. If you go online, you can actually find dozens of missing person cases and dozens of murder cases that have supposedly been solved by psychic detectives. Now, for this documentary, I myself went and saw a tarot card reader and a psychic, just to see what they had to say. I didn't personally find either experience very fascinating or jaw-dropping. The tarot card reader pegged me for being married. I didn't wear my wedding rings on purpose, but he had a 50-50 chance of getting it right. He also pegged me for having a son, another 50-50 chance. The psychic told me that I was on my second marriage, which is false. So if she does have powers, they were not in play at all that day. Now, 20 years ago, however, my girlfriend dragged me to a psychic fair. And a psychic at the psychic fair told me that I was going to create a film or a story or some sort of tangible thing to spread news of the world on a great subject, a very important subject. They even said the word documentary. When I asked what that subject would be, he said, I don't know. You'll know it when you see it. This was a husband and wife psychic tag team. Excuse me. And I didn't put any faith in what they had to say. But who knows? Maybe they do have powers. Maybe they have something there. And right now that prediction is coming true. But generally speaking, I have a hard time taking the psychic world seriously. But it was psychics in a few different forms that really drew me into the disappearance of Kim Amero. And it's a so-called psychic that keeps me here today. The mystery of these psychics involved in Kim's disappearance, it just continues to grow. I think I'm getting ahead of myself a little here. So let's start back at the beginning. So way back at the beginning, long before I ever contacted the Amero siblings about this documentary, while researching Kim's disappearance, I came across two websites on the internet, one entitled psychictarotinsights.com and the other one psychicsunite.org. Oddly enough, there is so little information, little truth on the internet regarding Kim's case. These two psychic websites came up on the first page of Google search results. You can try it for yourself to see. On the first website, a tarot reader discovered that Kim was East. The number 1 or 10 held significance. There was an older man involved in her disappearance, a widower, single dad, or bachelor. The cards came up with railways, golf courses, airports, and water. Oh, and there was a church in there too somewhere. The cards uncovered the name Will or Mill. Mountains, high places, barns, playrooms, a bank, markets, fairs, tennis courts. All these things the cards uncovered. The number 5, the number 4, the number 8, the number 7. Are you done listening to this? Because I'm done talking about it. Obviously, this tarot card reader was covering every basis, basically claiming that Kim could be anywhere in Canada. So I stopped reading on this website and moved on. I'm calling official shenanigans on psychictarotinsights.com. However, it did lead me to find psychicsunite.org, and for that, I'm thankful. There was a page dedicated to Kim on psychicsunite.org, and many psychics were weighing in on what they could see regarding her disappearance. Some saw vans and cars, some saw fields and streams. Realistically, their vagueness covered all of New Brunswick, could be really all of Canada. Someone even started giving out letters on there, like I see the letter C and I see the letter L. Now, normally I would dismiss this super fast, but because this site was free, and all of these so-called psychics, there was a lot of them weighing in there. They were taking time out of their day to help in this way that they thought was being helpful to try and find Kim. It made me really curious about this website, curious enough to scroll through page after page after page of all these things that these psychics were seeing. Once I started digging into psychicsunite.org, I started seeing comments from Tammy, Kim's sister, trying to feverishly piece this puzzle together that the psychics were laying out for her. She was using their comments and trying to fit them into like Kim's life and her last known day and locations she may be at. And to me, it was saddening. I found it a little heartbreaking that, you know, there's no leads, there's no news, there's, you know, it's so many years later. And so she's at this point, it seemed to me, where she's just like, I will try anything at this point to find my sister. I'm even going on this psychic website, seeing if anything that these psychics have to say hold any merit and try and fit that into Kim's life so I could find her. That's how desperate I am to find her. And it really broke my heart, and it solidified to me that I wanted to help any way that I can, you know, and I'm not a journalist. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a detective, you know, so this was my avenue to help. And this is, you know, all I had to offer. But I knew at the time that I had to help some way, because it just seems so unfair to me that this is, you know, where Kim's disappearance has brought Tammy, I guess. When I reached page 11 on psychicsunite.org, a commenter using the moniker Jane the Sinner came on. And I've changed her real name to Jane here, but I'll get to the reason behind that later. She had quipped up asking the psychics if they could see a certain car. I can't remember what kind of car it was, but it was a certain car, a certain hunting camp, a certain location in Upham, New Brunswick. She then popped up again a few pages later and asked about the name Randy. And I thought to myself, whoa. Hold the phone. These questions are way too specific. This girl absolutely knows something. And I thought to myself, could finding Kim be as easy as finding this Jane the Sinner character? Although she never said anything concrete in those first few pages, her requests to the psychics were just so damn specific. I really briefly thought that if I found Jane the Sinner, that I would find Kim Amero. I thought, honestly, it was going to be that easy. So I continued scrolling, obviously, stopping on every single Jane the Sinner entry. She started to talk about a guy named Randy who had sexually assaulted his daughter in horrible, unspeakable ways, and that he had a hunting camp in Upham near Hampton, New Brunswick. I wondered briefly if she was trying to blame this guy out of revenge for what he did to his daughter, like, blame Kim's disappearance on her. But then I kind of shrugged off the thought, because I thought, if you're out for revenge on this guy who did something to his daughter, why would you air it on a psychic website? Why wouldn't you take that to the police? That would be the ultimate, way to get them if that's what you were out to do. So I looked through the last few pages kind of carefully, trying to weigh her words and kind of figure out her angle and her involvement in this. I couldn't grasp what her intentions were at first, like on her goals by commenting on this site, but I was super interested. But I didn't know what to make of it at first, I guess. But right around the last page, Jane the Sinner posted 2 back-to-back posts that truly laid out her position quite obviously and clearly. The first post that Jane the Sinner made that was sort of a game changer for me was Jane admitting that she was the daughter that she had been speaking about during this entire thread. She was the one that was molested and tortured by her father Randy as a young girl. Jane said that her problems started right around the time Kim went missing. The monstrosities that she spoke of on this website had happened to her. Now, this isn't enough to tie her to Kim's case, and it kind of supports the revenge theory, but the next post made her intentions very obvious. She posted that Jane the Sinner was actually babysat as a young girl by Kimberly and Amero. Although Jane mentions that this babysitting was always done at her mom's house, never at Randy's, she also posted that she imagined there were times that Randy would see Kim at his ex-wife's house when he came to pick Jane up. And I concur. I mean, of course he did. I mean, these are 2 active parents, however divorced. They live minutes apart from each other. They're obviously going to know each other's babysitters. So these entries from Jane the Sinner really almost changed everything for me. Because right there in front of me, I'm reading that there's a monster with ties to Kim, a known psychopath, a known pedophile in Kim's life, however small his involvement at the time. I realized then that Jane the Sinner was on this website to plead with the psychics because she's so convinced of her father's guilt that she doesn't have any evidence. So now she's in Tammy's shoes in a way on this website where she's trying to fit what the psychics say into her father's world and her father's life. I mean, this is why she was asking about specific locations and vehicles. She was trying to see if psychics had any visions about her father's items, like his car and his camp. It made sense to me, and I thought, oh my God, I can't imagine your life, Jane, Imagine you're treated as a disposable toy in the most horrendous and in malicious ways by one of the men who you're supposed to trust unequivocally, and then 30 years later, you find yourself on a psychic website trying to figure out if your dad murdered your babysitter. Like, are you freaking kidding me? The strength and ferocity that Jane must contain to survive all of this is jaw-dropping. These are 2 events that would easily break someone that's just a little less strong as Jane is. No matter how much I try to put myself in Jane's shoes surviving this, I can't. It makes my problems feel very small and nonsensical, and it makes me very grateful for the childhood that I had, I guess. It's freaking brutal. It's a brutal admission, and how brave is Jane for admitting this stuff on this public psychic website, because these psychics were starting to get a little conspicuous of her as well, just like I was, wondering, hey, how do you know these things, and why are you pushing this? And then she finally just outed it and went, hey, this is the scoop. I'm the one that was treated like this by this monster, and I was babysat by Kim. I think my dad's guilty of, hurting or murdering Kim Amero. I can't, that's brave, and I'm so glad that Jane had this in her to come out, because this information is such a game changer, and you'll see soon just how game changing it is, how without this admission, so many things involved in Kim's case would never have come to light. Okay, let's move on. Moving on.
So under these two posts on psychicsunite.org, there was a post from Tammy, and I realized that there was a friendship between the Amero siblings and Jane. Tammy wrote to the psychics, sticking up for Jane in a way, claiming that she had been a magnanimous help and an incredible friend, and that she believed Jane is a necessary and integral key to finding her sister. It was here that I realized that finding Jane didn't equal finding Kim. It's not going to be that easy, and obviously I was a little foolish in thinking that it would be. But I do agree with Tammy that Jane, the sinner, is, was, has been, still is an integral key to getting us closer. Selfishly, a little bit, it was disappointing to me that Tammy was very well aware of this Randy character, because it told me that Jane and Tammy both felt so vividly against Randy's guilt, or about Randy's guilt, but obviously he had not been brought to justice, which was a little maddening. I started a manhunt for information regarding this Randy character, and I set out to find any and all information that I could about him. As a side note here, I'm purposely omitting the last name of Randy and Jane. There's no need to hurt Jane or siblings, any children that bear the same last name as this monster. I was also requested to do so, but we'll get to that a little bit later. So off to Google I went trotting. I almost thought, given the age of these website posts, 2010 to 2012, that maybe he had already been jailed for Kim's crime, because they were a little bit older. But Googling his first and last name pertaining to Kim's case literally turned up nothing. There was no association whatsoever, except for, rumors and opinions. There was no past news articles, no news videos, no nothing. But I did stumble upon a blog called The Adventures of Jenna and Neil, and the newspaper clipping you see pictured here was promptly displayed on a blog post with a very small excerpt from Kim's very bizarre case. This article, which I'm guessing is from the local newspaper here in St. John, the Telegraph Journal, states this. Prison Time for Monstrous Offenses, it's titled. A 62-year-old St. John man was sentenced on sexual assault charges on Thursday for incidents that took place approximately two decades ago. Randy Blank, who had no prior criminal record, was sentenced to 30 months in prison for what Provincial Court Judge Erwin Lampert called monstrous offenses. Randy will be listed on the National Sex Offender Registry for 20 years and has been ordered to have his DNA registered at the National DNA Databank. He's also prohibited from owning a firearm for 10 years. 30 months. That's what he got for what he did to Jane. 30 stupid, measly, easily served months. That's gross. I mean, the judge calls it monstrous offenses, but gives the guy 30 months. I was so disgusted, and I still am. And I was in pain for Jane the sinner when I found this article. That sentence is just so unfair. Here's this complete piece of human garbage, Randy, and by the time I stumble upon him, he's already out of jail for what he did to Jane. And here's the kicker. This piece of garbage lives, and has always lived, across the street from the fairgrounds that host the St. John exhibition. He lived there when he went to jail, and he lived there when Kim Amero disappeared from the, St. John exhibition. Capsize, he lives across the street from where Kim Amero went missing, directly across the street. I've pictured his house here. I don't know if I'm allowed to do that, but I did. And when I sat outside of his house, and I thought of the unspeakable things that he had done to Jane inside that house, it honestly takes every ounce of, strength that I have not to just run over there and set that house on fire on behalf of Jane. The city should demolish it like they did with Paul Bernardo's house in St. Catharines, Ontario. I'm sorry, I apologize. Moving on. If you're wondering where I know how Randy lives, this is a weird part of the journey. I mean, the police have been incredibly unhelpful to this point. They've lost tapes, dental records, and originals that could have had his fingerprints on them in the past. And so I'm sure that the police are as frustrated as I am when it comes to Kim's case with so little information at my disposal. Thankfully, I have the super sleuth Amero siblings on my team. However, it wasn't from them that I learned where Randy lived. I learned it from my husband. Like I said, this is where the journey of finding Kim Amero starts to get really bizarre. But with my findings way back when, long before I knew about Michael Wayne McGray or the many blunders that have kept this case, nearly impossible to solve for so long. And just as I had made initial contact with the Amero siblings about this documentary, I sat down with my husband one night to tell him this journey that I wanted to go on and the people that I wanted to help find peace. About halfway through telling my story to my husband, he said, "Wait, babe, you can't do this documentary. Not without my friend, let's call him Jack, not without Jack's permission." "Jack?" I said. My husband was speaking of a very close high school friend of his. When my husband moved away from St. John for more than 10 years, they kind of lost touch. But upon my husband's return about 4 or 5 years ago, they had reunited a few times. They'd taken the kids places, swimming, etc. But you know what? Time changes people and life gets busy. So me personally, at this point, I'd only met Jack maybe a dozen times. My husband told me that when he and Jack were kids, there was always something strange about Jack's house. He said that they didn't go inside much and that Jack's sister was very recluse. He said the 1 or 2 times that he did go in, he went into their basement. And Jack told my husband that his dad was a wizard and a psychic. As well, he said that there was like a weird locked room in his basement that belonged to Jack's father, and there was like a pentagram or something on the floor. As a kid, my husband knew that something wasn't right and that Jane probably wasn't safe or being treated as she should, but he didn't know what to do about it. Fast forward many, many years later, when my husband initially moved back to St. John from Ontario, he had Jack over for a few drinks just to, catch up or whatever. Eventually that evening when Jack came over, he and my husband wound up in the basement. Jack told my husband that his father was about to go to jail for committing unspeakable crimes to his sister. He then went on to say that he's also very certain that his father did kill Kim Amero and bury her in his camp in Upham near Hampton, New Brunswick. My husband recalled while Jack was explaining all this a time that he and Jack were driving around Upham and stopped near this camp to have a smoke. And he said that the back end of the car started jumping as if someone had placed their hands on the trunk and was like bouncing the vehicle up and down. It scared them to death, I guess. And for some reason, while Jack was telling the story to my husband, his mind immediately went to that night, thinking, was that the ghost of Kim, trying to tell us something? Anyways, whatever it was, they were both terrified, and they immediately took off driving. So Jack and my husband spoke at length that night in my basement, unbeknownst to me, about the disappearance of Kim Amero. And Jack told him that he and his sister had both found this tin in their ceiling tiles of their house, and in it was a pair of eyeglasses that looked identical to Kim's, and I think there was a lock of hair or something in there too. My husband can't quite remember. This conversation happened 4 years ago. So Jack and my husband, kind of spoke about the impact of this incredible story and the impact it could have on him and his sister and his children, and they both decided that night that was a story best kept in my basement. He had not repeated it until I explained to my husband that I had intentions of filming this documentary and digging into Randy's past. And it was at this time that my husband said to me that I would need Jack's permission to move on out of respect for Jack. Jane, out of respect for Jane as well, and out of respect for their children as well. So, after my husband told me this story, I was left with 2 very shitty options. Call it off right then and there, or build up the cojones to text someone I've only met a handful of times. I mean, this guy means the world to my husband, and I didn't know how to say, hey, thinking of doing a documentary about your horrible excuse of a father. Is that cool? I'm going to dig up all these old memories for you, and I, hopefully we'll expose him as a murderer and revisit the incredible horror he rained upon your sister. That's ridiculous. Like, this entire documentary, to me, it seems, has been like one impossible letter write after another, it seems. I definitely couldn't call him. I knew that. I'm definitely not brave enough for that conversation. The thought of it just made me completely sick to my stomach. So I took the chicken route and I texted him this ridiculous message promising to call it all off if he was uncomfortable with it or if he thinks it will negatively impact his life, too much. I sent the text honestly with nothing but love, but I truly was sweating his response. I waited for the, go F yourself text, which, I would have been fine with and completely understood. But instead, Jack was so incredibly kind to me. He thanked me for my honesty, told me I was ridiculous for being too chicken to call, and he asked me to leave it with him for a while so he could think about it. And so I did. Now, a text bringing up these horrible memories can really play on the psyche, and I completely respect that. I mean, asking the Amero siblings to relive and retell the same damn story that they've told almost their entire lives was top shelf level difficult. Rehashing the details of the worst day of your life over and over, it's like, I can only imagine that it's like being trapped in your very own personal, intimate hell almost. And now I'm asking one of my husband's best childhood friends if it's okay if I tell the world the horrific things his father's done and may or may not have done to Kim. Now, side note here, it was during this wait that the website disappeared. The psychicsunite.org forum, it was gone completely. No longer in existence and now for sale. I attempted to reach out to their Facebook group. That kind of failed. And strangely, the information they have listed on their Facebook page regarding Kim's disappearance is also gone. Now there's just like a photo from a super old post. One of the moderators that I did get a hold of the website told me that it was hacked and being held for ransom, if you can imagine. I don't really have anything notable to say about this. I just found the timing of these deletions very convenient and interesting. Days after I contact psychicsunite.org about Kim, the website disappears, as does any story of Kim's disappearance. I have no theories about this, no conspiracy. It could be completely coincidental. I'm just reporting this happenstance to disclose the full story and to talk about my full journey, really. Waiting for Jack to get back to me was nail-biting. After a few weeks, he sent me a text back. I was at work when it happened, and my heart was beating super fast when I saw that it was a text from Jack. And he only asked me to change his name in order to protect his children, which is a great dad move, really. And I was like, a huge exhale just came over me. I was so incredibly thankful. He also asked me to protect his sister the best way I can. And so obviously I've changed her name as well, and I've completely omitted last names. Jack, if you're listening, you could have ended this documentary before it even began. This story is important. Finding Kim is incredibly important, and you're letting this go on, and I thank you for the bottom of my heart. Like, it's long past time for this to be over. It's long past time for the Ameros to finally have some peace, and I'm hoping that together with you, the listener or watcher, and Jack and Jane, we can help the Ameros get the peace they deserve. So now you know the backstory. You know the who, what, when, and why I came across this Randy information. This isn't the end of the Randy story. In fact, it's not even the beginning. The horrors and the suspense and the psychological games that this man has played for years with the Amero siblings have not even been discussed yet. This case, honestly, gets his most bizarre twists from here on out. So in next week's episode, we're going to discuss the final theory regarding the disappearance of Kim Amero, that she went with someone she knew willingly, and that was an honest mistake of hers. Honestly, from here on out is the dictionary definition of truth is stranger than fiction, for sure. We're definitely going to talk to Jane next week, and I'm hoping to talk to Randy as well. So thank you for tuning into Chapter 3, The Backstory. And as always, if you'd like to contact me or you have some news regarding anything that I've said thus far in this documentary, please contact me at my email address, jamie@live.ca, JAYMEE@live.ca. If you have any information regarding the disappearance of Kim Amero, please contact the St. John Police Department. Thank you so much for tuning in, if I haven't already thanked you, and I'll see you next Thursday morning at 9 a.m.
Come on down from your mountain. I'm on a belly leave. For 20 years and counting, you've been